We're back and you're watching News Channel 3 live at 9 on this Friday morning. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis is the name and legacy that most Americans are familiar with. And it's the life of the former First Lady of this country that one Memphis native is exploring in her new book.
Yeah, that is Finding Jackie, A Life Reinvented by Dr. Oline Eaton. And she takes readers through a story that remains relevant even today. We have Dr. Eaton here. She's joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back home to Memphis.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back home.
And I must ask, what does a woman from Memphis, from the Mid-South, born right here in Midtown, how do you fall in love with Jackie Kennedy?
I think we moved around a lot when I was a child, and so I kind of had this sort of restless childhood, and there was a rhythm to her life, I think, that kind of captured me, and just kind of as someone who feels like a bit of a misfit. I was interested in this woman when I was 12, not a lot of preteens and dead historical figures. And so I think it was just kind of a way out in some degrees. She traveled a lot, she saw a lot of things, she had this really interesting life and loved reading, and I loved reading, and so I think that really captured my attention.
I'm kind of wondering, over the years, she has pretty much, for a lot of people, had this certain mystique, but at the same time, some people would say there's some things about her that may be a myth. How do you kind of differentiate that in your book?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of I'm engaging a lot with the stories that were told about her. And so one of the things that interests me is, as an incredibly famous person, which I am not, is how would someone live with those stories? You're trying to live your own life. How do you live alongside everyone thinking they know everything about you, and they know who you should date, and they know what you should do? So that idea of living a life in parallel with a myth that's still developing. And I hope that in writing about her this way, I'm kind of trying to break down the myth and say, actually, she is even famous people or ordinary people living their lives. Yeah.
And there's so many of us who remember her as Jacqueline Kennedy, especially during her husband's unfortunate assassination. Then many came to know Jackie Onassis. And does she actually have to kind of reinvent herself, so to speak?
I think historically we do tend to see people as like distinct in periods of their lives. Like, we are always ourselves, right? And so I think it's more a process of becoming and like having that freedom to explore, kind of leaving the restraints that she's had as an incredibly famous, incredibly photographed person in the U.S. and getting away for a while kind of enabled her to learn and see new things and try new things out as well. And also just when I started this when I was 20 doing my MA, I thought 42 was wildly old, and now I'm 42 publishing it, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, you learn things with age. And so I think that's just also just growing up, having experiences, surviving the extremely traumatic murder of her husband at a time when there was no diagnosis of PTSD. I think that, that leads to a really, really extraordinary life.
And a different connection over the years. And this has been called the Best Jackie Biography. So what was your research going into this? I know you said you loved her since you were 12 years old, but how did you go about researching this in the years that you told us that you put into it?
Yeah, I think, so I first finished this in 2005. It was horrendous and embarrassing. I printed copies for all of my family at Office Max, and now they haunt me.
At Office Max?
Yes, yes, I have them. I'm like, don't share that, don't show that to anybody. That's terrible. And there I just kind of used the biographies that existed because they didn't have any research methods. And then when I went to London and did it for my PhD, it was actually really helpful to be abroad and have people be like, what is a First Lady? And I was like, well, that's a hard question to answer that we
Definitely
don't think about. And so what I wound up doing was just going day by day in the newspaper archives on newspapers.com and using every single combination of names that I could think of: Jackie Onassis, Jacqueline Kennedy, Jackie O, just everything, and tracking the story day by day as it developed, kind of like how we would if we being on Twitter now. A similar thing. It was just unfolding on first pages and newspapers, often above the fold, like Jackie went smiling down the sidewalk, and you'd be like, why is this breaking news? But to me, I think it's really, really hard, even though I've written a whole book about it, to capture now how much coverage there was of this woman's life. How new that was then as well. To be able to open the newspaper every single day and pretty reliably, no matter where you were, if you were in Erie, Pennsylvania, or you were in Memphis, or you were in California, expect that Jackie was going to be somewhere. Even in a letter to an editor, or just an advertisement might mention her or something. She was everywhere and really viral in a way that before that framework even existed for thinking about it, pre-internet and everything.
How do you think she should be remembered today? Because there seem to be so many parts of her personality that are out there, and she was also considered by some one of the first feminists out there, was she not?
Yeah, I think Gloria Steinem was quite frustrated with her at the time. She didn't do as much as she could have. She wasn't as public about it. But I think what I've tried to do is bring out the parts of her life of how, like, we're all failing in the social movements around us in some way. No one, when you're alive, has the time to support everything. And I think that she did, and quietly and privately support causes that she cared about, and through relationships as well with the people who were involved in them. Yeah.
What's been one of the greatest compliments for you since you've done this book?
I mean, the blurb from Kitty Kelly, who I adore, was pretty exciting. But also, I was able to meet with her brother, Yusha Auchincloss, and interview him at Hammersmith Farm, and I was able to meet with Gloria Steinem. Each of them, Gloria Steinem was like, I think if someone had to do this, I think she'd be glad it was you. And Yusha Auchincloss told me that she would be glad I was doing this. I don't think that's true, but those were very helpful kind of endorsements and things to have as I was continuing to work on it.
Well, an amazing story to be told. Make sure you say hi to your mom and dad who are tuning in here in Memphis.
It's good to have you back home here in the Mid-South.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Congratulations, by the way. All right.
All right, still to come on Live at 9, a feature on a smartphone saves the life of a Florida man. We'll explain how.